My true story from Nebraska. My son said the family trip was too expensive for extras, so I upgraded my own ticket and flew first class, past the "Mama, you can sleep on the floor if you get tired." And the plane ticket? Honestly, you should be thankful we are even bringing you at all. He said it so casually. My son, the boy I raised with blood in my gums and calluses on my fingers, the man now wearing a collared shirt I had pressed just that morning. He did not even look at me when he said it, just kept chewing his chicken and scrolling on his phone like nothing had happened. Across the table, his wife let out a light laugh. Not the kind that made you feel included. No, it was that sharp, sugary kind, like honey hiding a thorn. "We really were not going to ask you," she said, sipping wine from a glass she never offered me. "But then we figured one more body would not cost much, as long as you don't expect a real seat or like snacks or anything." I kept my eyes on my plate. The mashed potatoes had gone cold. I could not quite tell if it was the food or my hands that were shaking, so I just kept my fork moving. "You are just extra, Mom," my son added. "Do you even understand what that means? Like, not essential. Like, something someone might forget to invite but decides to include at the last minute. No offense." "No offense," his wife echoed, smirking. My throat went tight. I picked at a bit of chicken skin and folded it neatly under my napkin. I looked up briefly, only to see my grandson ignoring me completely. Earbuds in, eyes locked on his iPad. He used to light up when I walked into a room. Now, I was just background noise. The evening went on like that. I cleared the plates, as I always did, even though it was not my kitchen. I wiped the counters while they poured themselves dessert wine and talked about the trip. Florida, beach house, ocean views. My name came up only once. "She can have the corner," my daughter-in-law said. "By the kitchenette. We will just put down a blanket or something. The beds are obviously for us and the kids." "She will be fine," my son agreed. "She is used to making do." They said it like I was a dog. An afterthought. Someone who should just be grateful for table scraps and floor space. I said nothing. I just nodded and kept wiping. That night, in the small guest room with the broken lamp, I lay down and stared at the ceiling. The mattress had a dip in the middle that cradled my back like a grave. I could not sleep. My bones ached, not just from age, but from something deeper. Something that sat in the chest like a weight. My mind wandered back decades. I saw myself hunched over my sewing machine in the tiny apartment on Grant Street, the one with the thin walls and the rattling pipes. My husband had died suddenly, 30 years old, a heart attack in his sleep. He worked 12-hour shifts at the mill and still came home with a smile. He had left me with nothing but his work boots and a boy. That boy had been my world. I remembered the nights I stayed up sewing uniforms and hemming prom dresses. I remembered the winters I wore newspaper in my shoes so my son could have a new coat. I remembered pretending to be full so he could eat another spoonful of stew. I remembered every sacrifice. I remember them still. The next morning I came into the kitchen to find my flight details printed and stuffed into an old envelope. My son handed it to me like it was a bill. "Don't lose this," he said. "Basic economy. No bags, no changes, no boarding priority. Just get on the plane and stay quiet." I nodded. I always nodded. As I folded the paper, I caught a glimpse of the seat assignment. 31E. A middle seat, next to the toilets. "Don't ask for help from the flight attendants," my daughter-in-law said. "We do not want to be embarrassed." I said nothing. I tucked the envelope into the pocket of my old wool coat, the one with a hidden seam I had sewn myself years ago when my fingers were still steady and my eyes still sharp. Inside that seam, I felt the small, cold shape of the black Amex my husband had left me. I had not touched it in 25 years. Not when I had the flu and no money for medicine, not when the roof leaked, not when my glasses broke. He had given it to me with one condition: only if you forget who you are, or if he does. I pressed the envelope against my chest and listened to the sound of them laughing upstairs. My grandson was shouting about a video game. My daughter-in-law was FaceTiming someone, talking about the ocean view and how quaint it would be to bring her husband's old-fashioned mom. I sat at the edge of the kitchen chair and picked up a grain of rice that had fallen on the table. Old habits. When you have known hunger, waste is never just waste. My son's words echoed in my head. You're just extra, not essential, not loved, just a burden disguised as a person. But here is the thing about women like me. We remember everything, and we wait. Because one day, even the people who think you are nothing will see just how much power silence can hold. The days before the trip blurred together in a haze of errands and orders. I was told to be useful, and so I was. I folded shirts, matched socks, ironed swimsuits, and packed bags that were not mine. My fingers ached from rolling tiny pairs of shorts and zip-locking sunscreen bottles. My knees burned from crawling across floors to collect scattered toys. No one said thank you. No one even noticed. They had appointments, manicures, spray tans, facials. I had instructions. Make sure the kids nap by 2, no snacks after 4. Don't let them use their tablets for more than an hour, and try not to feed them sugar. It makes them wild. I nodded, always nodding, always swallowing whatever else rose in my throat. At one point, my daughter-in-law emerged from her room in a robe that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. She breezed past me, then stopped abruptly when she saw me reaching for my coat. It was the same one I had worn for years, wool, charcoal gray, the hemline a little frayed, the left pocket repaired, with invisible stitches only I could spot. She looked at it like it offended her. "Wait," she said, her lips twisting. "Are you planning to wear that to the airport?" I looked down at the coat. "It keeps me warm," I said softly. She laughed, loudly. "In that rag? Mom, seriously, people are going to think we're escorting a homeless woman. I mean, maybe that's a vibe, but not on this trip." My grandson, sitting nearby with his headphones, snorted without looking up. I held the coat close to my chest and nodded again. That night, after they had all gone to bed, I sat by the kitchen light and turned the coat inside out. I took out my sewing kit, the same one I had used when my son needed a blazer for his first interview, the same one I used when I made his college graduation gown, because we could not afford the real thing. Thread by thread, I reinforced the seam along the shoulder. I trimmed the edge near the wrist. And then, my hands shaking only slightly, I checked the inside pocket. Still there. Still tucked in the lining was the black Amex my husband had hidden for me. Still untouched. My mind wandered back to the summer my son got into the University of Iowa. We had nothing, absolutely nothing, but I found a used sports coat at the thrift store and spent 3 nights tailoring it to fit his broadening shoulders. When I gave it to him, he looked at it with mild annoyance and said, "Couldn't we just buy something new?" He wore it once, then never again. And now, years later, his wife laughed at my coat like it was a joke. Like I was the joke. 2 days before the flight, I was up before everyone else making toast for the kids when my son walked in holding a single sheet of paper. "Your ticket," he said, handing it over like he was doing me a favor. The paper was flimsy, a home-printed itinerary with no folder, no sleeve, not even my name spelled right. I looked at the seat number. 32E, a middle seat, back row, next to the toilets. He must have seen my expression because he shrugged. "It's just to have you there," he said. "Don't expect anything fancy. We had to pay for 6 seats already. Honestly, you should be glad we bothered." I folded the paper carefully and slid it into my coat pocket. No one asked if I wanted to sit next to the family. No one offered a window seat or even a moment's consideration. Later that night, I heard my daughter-in-law on the phone with her mother, laughing. "She's going to be stuffed in the back like cargo," she said, voice echoing down the hall. "But she's fine with it. Old people don't care." I sat on the edge of my cot in the laundry room, where I had been moved after my grandson wanted more space in the den. I pulled the coat around me and let my hand drift once again to the hidden seam. The card was still there, cold, silent, powerful. They thought they were doing me a kidness. They thought I had nothing. They thought wrong. The airport was buzzing with the usual chaos, suitcases clicking against tiled floors, announcements blaring from the overhead speakers, and impatient families rushing past in waves. I walked slowly, not because I could not move faster, but because I was carrying my youngest grandson on my hip and dragging 2 suitcases behind me. My back screamed, but I smiled every time he looked at me. He was the only one who had not forgotten I existed. At least, not yet. My son and his wife were several steps ahead, strolling like royalty, their designer luggage gliding smoothly beside them. My daughter-in-law was on the phone, laughing in that high artificial voice that always made me wince. No, it's a full week, she said, flipping her hair over one shoulder. Ocean front, private pool, full kitchen, but I told James I am not lifting a finger. We're not peasants. We even brought the old one with us. For the kids, you know. I paused, pressing my lips together. The old one. That was me now. Not Mom, not Grandma, just another unpaid service. A woman in a navy vest approached as we neared the check-in counter. She had kind eyes, the kind that still saw people. "Ma'am, would you like a wheelchair or assistance through security?" she asked gently. I opened my mouth, just a crack, not to say yes but to say thank you for seeing me, but I never got the chance. "No need," my son cut in sharply. "She's fine, just old. She's not disabled," he chuckled, like it was a joke. Like I was a joke. The woman hesitated, then nodded, stepping back. I met her eyes for a brief second, trying to convey something. Apology, maybe, or shame. But it was gone as quickly as it came. We reached the check-in kiosk. They scanned their QR codes and breezed through. My daughter-in-law handed me my crumpled printout like a grocery list. I approached the kiosk and tried to steady my fingers long enough to type. "Let me help you with that," the attendant said, stepping in when I missed a letter. "Thank you," I whispered. I did not miss the glance she gave my boarding pass. 32E. No upgrades, no perks, baggage not included, human cargo. "Your bag's overweight," she said gently. "There's a fee." "I can pay," I said, reaching into the side of my boot. My fingers found the soft lining I had sewn myself years ago. Sturdy, hidden, known only to me. I pulled out the card. It was small, black, and carried more weight than any suitcase I owned. I handed it to her without a word. She looked at it, then looked at me differently. Not with pity, with recognition. She processed the fee and handed the card back with both hands, like it meant something. "Thinking about you." Hey, and it did. As we moved towards security, I fell behind again. My son turned once, briefly. "Try not to hold us up, okay? It's already a hassle traveling with you." I nodded. I was always nodding. At security, they handed me the baby's bottle and their electronics. I shuffled through the line, barefoot, holding onto their passports, their wallets, their snacks. I was the mule, the servant. No one said a word of thanks. After we passed through, my daughter-in-law clapped her hands lightly. "Let's go to the lounge," she said to her husband. "The kids can play there." "Oh, Mom, you probably can't get in. It's for premium passengers only." She said it like she was talking about a fancy club I had no business even thinking about. I sat near the gate, holding the youngest while the others disappeared behind the frosted glass of luxury. My legs throbbed. My feet were swollen. Still, I smiled when the baby reached for my face, and then I remembered. Years ago, just before my husband died, we sat on our porch. He had not been feeling well. Chest pain, short breath. I told him to see a doctor. He told me we could not afford it. Instead, he handed me a small envelope. "If something happens to me," he said, "use this, only if you need it, only if you forget who you are." I had not understood then. I was too busy worrying, too busy sewing, too busy surviving. But now, decades later, sitting near Gate 32 with a baby on my hip and the smell of Cinnabon wafting through the air, I understood. He knew. He knew this would happen. He knew our son would grow up and forget. I reached into my boot again and touched the card. I let my fingers rest there for a long time. The boarding announcement echoed across the terminal. Pre-boarding now for families with young children and first-class passengers. My son and his wife emerged from the lounge, faces glowing, smiles wide. "Let's go," he said, not looking at me. I stood slowly, bones stiff, and joined the line. They handed the baby off to me without a word, then walked ahead. I held that child close and took my first step onto the jet bridge, knowing that everything was about to change. The air inside the plane was stale, the overhead lights too bright for comfort. I shuffled down the narrow aisle with the rest of the boarding group, the baby still squirming in my arms, the smell of disinfectant and recycled breath pressing close. As I reached row 32, I saw my seat. Middle. Back row. Right in front of the lavatories. The two passengers already seated on either side were both large men, broad-shouldered and oblivious, headphones already in place. I murmured a soft, "Excuse me," but neither budged. I squeezed myself in, gently bouncing the baby to keep him calm, though my arms ached. There was no pillow, no blanket. The seatbelt was twisted and fraying, and from the smell behind me, the restroom had already been used more than once that morning. I looked down at my paper ticket again, as if it might have changed. 32E. I was exactly where they wanted me. From the front of the cabin, my son and his wife lounged comfortably in Economy Plus, legs stretched out, laughing as they took selfies. I watched as they flagged down the flight attendant to order drinks before takeoff. I tucked the envelope back into my coat and pressed my hands to my knees, steadying myself. The baby had fallen asleep against my shoulder, warm and soft, unaware of everything. As the plane lifted off, I stared out the small sliver of window available to me between the two shoulders. The clouds looked soft, like the blankets I did not have. The lights dimmed, and the snack cart began to rattle down the aisle. "Would you like a drink or blanket, ma'am?" the flight attendant asked gently. Before I could answer, my son's voice rose from 3 rows ahead. No, don't give her anything," he called out, loud enough for the rows around us to hear. "She's fine. She does not need anything fancy. We're trying to keep things simple, budget conscious." He laughed at his own joke. A few others chuckled out of politeness, not understanding the cruelty behind it, but I did. The flight attendant hesitated, unsure. "She'll be okay," he added. "She's used to going without." My face flushed, but I nodded again, saving the young woman from awkwardness. "I'm fine," I whispered, but I was not. Not because of the seat or the smell or the ache in my spine, not even because of the lack of a pillow or the way the man to my right had already fallen asleep with his elbow digging into my ribs. I was not fine because my son had said that, had said it like it was a punchline, like I was a joke worth laughing at. The woman across the aisle leaned over, concern in her eyes. "Do you need anything?" she asked, quiet and kind. I smiled. "No, dear, I'm all right." But the moment sat heavy in the air. People had heard. Heads were turning. A child in the row in front of me whispered to her mother, "Why did that man yell at the old lady?" Her mother hushed her, but not before glancing back at me with a mix of sympathy and discomfort. I adjusted the sleeping baby and stared straight ahead, expression calm, breath steady. Because while they were watching an old woman get humiliated, I was already somewhere else, in my mind. I imagined the clink of real glass, not plastic cups, the chilled wine, the soft weight of a proper blanket draped across my lap, the hush of first class where no one shouted across the aisle and every request was met with a smile. 2 hours. That was all I had to wait. 2 more hours of this, then everything would shift. My son turned once and caught my eye. He looked annoyed, like I was somehow drawing attention by simply existing. "You're fine, right, Mom?" he said, voice still carrying too far. "We don't want any drama." I nodded. I always nodded. The man to my left snored softly. The baby stirred in his sleep, tiny fingers brushing my neck. I looked down at him and remembered when his father was that small, when I used to rock him in my arms, singing softly while patching holes in his socks. I had thought love would be enough. I had thought sacrifice would be remembered. But there I was, sitting in a seat that smelled like bleach and mildew, being told by my only child to stay silent and grateful. And I smiled, not because I was happy, not because I forgave, but because I knew something they did not. Because in 2 hours, I would no longer be the woman in seat 32E, and they would no longer be the ones in control. I shifted the baby gently, closed my eyes, and leaned back against the cracked leather headrest. Let them laugh now. Let them call me extra. They would never see it coming. When the plane landed for the layover in Dallas, I moved slowly. My joints were stiff from being wedged between 2 unbothered strangers for 3 hours. My son and his wife gathered their things without a word, their children whining about snacks, their bags bursting with souvenirs already. They had not offered me water or even a glance. As we stepped off the jet bridge, I stayed close enough to hear them, but not close enough to be heard. That was the way they liked it. "We have 2 hours until the next flight," my son said. "We'll hit the lounge, freshen up." "I need to use the restroom," I said quietly, clutching my coat. My daughter-in-law waved a hand. "Sure. Just meet us at gate C14. Don't get lost." I nodded. I always nodded. But I did not go to the restroom. Instead, I walked calmly to the nearest departure screen and found what I was looking for. Flight 2817 to Miami. Departure, 3:42 p.m. First-class seats still available. My heart beat faster as I made my way to the service counter. The woman behind the desk wore a sharp navy uniform and a bright smile that faded slightly when she saw my wrinkled coat and soft-soled shoes. But then I reached into my inner coat pocket and pulled out the card. The black Amex. She straightened. "I'd like to upgrade my seat to first class," I said. She blinked, then looked at the screen. "You're currently in economy. There are 2 seats left in first. One moment, ma'am," she typed. Her eyes flicked back to me as she asked, "May I see your ID?" I handed it over with the calm of a woman who had waited long enough. After a few minutes, she smiled again, but this time, it was real. "You're confirmed for 1A. Would you like assistance boarding early?" "No, thank you," I said. "I'd prefer to board last." "Of course. Enjoy your flight." I walked away, with the new boarding pass tucked securely into my coat. I found a quiet corner near the windows and watched planes take off. No one saw me. No one even noticed I was gone. At 3:30, the boarding announcement began. Families with children, active military, first class. My son and his wife were already at the gate, trying to corral the kids and juggle their bags. My daughter-in-law looked around, annoyed. "Where's your mother?" she snapped. My son glanced around and sighed. "She's probably sitting somewhere being slow. I told her to get here. God, if she misses the flight." But she had not missed the flight. She was already at the front of the line. I handed my new boarding pass to the gate agent. The man scanned it, smiled, and said, "Enjoy seat 1A, ma'am." "Thank you," I said softly. I walked down the jet bridge alone, the quiet clicking of my shoes echoing in the tunnel. When I stepped into the aircraft, the world changed. There was no crowd, no elbows, no glares, just soft lighting, fresh air, and a smiling flight attendant who took my coat. "Welcome aboard," she said. "Can I get you a drink before takeoff?" "Red wine, please," I said, settling into the wide leather seat. It wrapped around me like a long-forgotten embrace. A cool cloth was offered for my hands. A blanket rested gently on my lap. Outside the window, the terminal was still bustling, and then I saw them. My son and his wife entering the plane, red-faced and rushed, dragging 2 cranky children behind them. My daughter-in-law's voice cut through the aisle. "Where is she?" she snapped. They looked down the rows of economy. They looked behind them. They looked at each other. Then, finally, my son looked forward, and he saw me. Sitting in 1A with my wine, with my blanket, with a look of absolute calm. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I smiled. Not a smug smile, not even a triumphant one, just quiet, soft, steady, the smile of a woman who remembered everything and had waited long enough. The hum of the first-class cabin was low and peaceful. I had barely taken my second sip of red wine when I saw him storming down the aisle, my son, eyes wild, arms swinging as he shoved past a startled flight attendant. "Mom," he hissed, "what the hell is this?" I set my glass down carefully. "Where did you get this seat?" he demanded. "You were in 32E. I folded my napkin in my lap and met his eyes, calm. "I upgraded. With what money?" His voice rose. "What money, Mom? You live on Social Security and guilt trips." I said nothing. The words did not sting. They missed entirely. He glanced around, lowering his voice just enough for only a few nearby passengers to hear. "You stole from me, didn't you? Took money from my account somehow? Did you steal my wallet?" I blinked slowly. "I used my own," I said. "Money your father left me. Money I never touched, until now." He laughed, a bitter barked sound. "You expect me to believe that? You've never had anything." He took a step closer. "I paid for everything, this whole trip, and you're sitting up here like some damn queen?" People were watching now. The woman in 1B stiffened in her seat. A flight attendant approached, hands raised in quiet concern. "Sir," she said gently, "you need to return to your seat. We'll be departing soon." He ignored her. His face was red, his hands clenched. "You're embarrassing me," he snapped. Then he did it. He slapped me. Not hard enough to leave a bruise, but enough to turn every head in that cabin. Enough to stun the entire row into silence. My wineglass rattled on the tray. Gasps filled the air. One woman covered her mouth. The man across the aisle stood up so fast his tray table snapped upward. "That's abuse," he said, voice sharp. "You're disgusting." My son froze. A second later, another voice from further down added, "You don't speak to anyone like that, let alone your mother." The flight attendant stepped between us. "Sir, you need to go back to your seat now." But it was too late. The captain had been notified. Security was alerted before we even left the gate. When the plane landed in Miami, 2 officers were waiting. They approached him quietly. No cuffs, no drama, just finality. "Sir, you've been reported for in-flight misconduct and aggression. You're being placed on the airline's no-fly list effective immediately. Please, come with us." His mouth fell open. "You can't do this! This is my mother!" But no one came to his defense. Not even his wife, who stood frozen with both kids clinging to her legs. As they led him away, I sat still. My hands did not shake. My heart did not race. The flight crew returned a few minutes later with a sealed envelope. "Ma'am," the lead attendant said with a kind smile, "we're so sorry you had to experience that. The airline would like to offer you 3 complimentary first-class flights. Anywhere in the world, anytime you choose." I took the envelope, and I smiled. Quiet, calm, unbothered. Not because I had won, but because I remembered who I was, and now so did everyone else. The hotel in Miami was not just elegant, it was indulgent. White marble floors that gleamed under my steps, a private balcony with ocean views, staff who called me ma'am and meant it. The concierge carried my bag as if it were filled with diamonds, not 3 changes of clothes and an old sewing kit. That night, I drew a bath so deep it swallowed me whole. The water smelled faintly of lavender, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to fully exhale. The next morning, I sat on a cushioned lounger, a breakfast tray before me, fluffy pancakes with berry compote, eggs perfectly poached, and a silver pot of real coffee. Not the burnt kind from discount tins. Real, rich coffee. I opened my phone, something I rarely used except for checking the time in old photos, and there it was, a text message. It was from my grandson, the oldest one. "Grandma, I'm sorry about what happened. Dad's been acting crazy. I didn't know it was that bad. I hope you're okay." I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I did not reply. Instead, I opened the camera and took a photo of the breakfast spread, the soft napkins, the view of the Atlantic, the steam curling from the coffee. Then I opened Facebook. I posted the photo with a single line, "The extra is living like a queen today." Within minutes, likes and comments poured in. Old church friends, women from the sewing circle, even a cousin I had not spoken to in years. "You deserve it, Ruth. So proud of you. They should have known better." I smiled to myself. Not because of the attention, but because the silence had finally been broken. Later that day, I called the airline's platinum line. I used one of my complimentary first-class tickets to book a trip to Alaska, somewhere I had always wanted to go but never dared say out loud. Just before sunset, I stood barefoot on the balcony, feeling the wind wrap around me like a promise. They had called me extra, but I had become unforgettable. 2 weeks later, I stepped off a return flight to Nebraska. Some first class, of course. The seat was wide, the wine crisp, the silence sweeter than any apology I had never received. No pushing, no glares, no muttered insults over who belonged where. Just kindness, service, respect. The kind I had not tasted in decades. I wore a new coat, simple, navy, tailored just for me. Not too loud, not too soft, just enough to say, I choose myself now. Outside the airport, a private car waited. Not because I was rich or flashy, but because I could, and because I deserved to sit in the front for once. When we turned onto my son's street, I asked the driver to slow down. There it was, the house I had helped him buy. Not in my name, of course, he insisted on that, but every mortgage payment had my fingerprints, my pension, my sacrifice all over it. For years, I had sent checks quietly, never asking for thanks. The porch was quiet, the lawn was overgrown, the mailbox stuffed. But taped to the front door was something new, a white envelope, stamped official. I stepped out of the car, walked slowly up the path. I had mailed that envelope 2 days earlier from Miami. Certified. The letter inside was simple. Notice of financial termination. Dear James, effective immediately, all financial support from Ruth M. is hereby ended. This includes mortgage contributions, insurance payments, and emergency fund access. For over 10 years, you have benefited from silent, monthly deposits made possible through a private account your father and I built together. You were never told because I believed love did not require invoice, but now I believe in truth. I believe in letting people stand on their own, and I believe in consequences. Sincerely, Ruth Hare. I stood there for a moment, letting the wind play with the edge of the envelope. The door creaked open. It was his wife. She gasped when she saw me. Ruth, what are you doing here? She looked different, paler, tired. Her usual polish had dulled. I was just stopping by, I said calmly. We didn't know when you were coming back. James is at work. I know. She looked at the envelope, then back at me. Is this a joke? No, I said. It's clarity. Her eyes narrowed. You can't just pull support. We've built our life around that money. The house, the car, the kids. I built my life around my son, I said, and you both threw me in the back of a plane. She flinched. That pleased me more than I wanted to admit. Ruth, listen, she said, her tone softer now. We've made mistakes, but you can't just— I can, I interrupted. And I did. I turned, walked back to the car. Before I got in, I looked once more at the house. The curtains drawn, the porch light flickering, the silence inside not unlike the silence they once gave me. It no longer felt like my burden. It no longer felt like home. Back at my own place, I unpacked slowly. I hung up my new coat. I placed a photo from Alaska on the mantel, me standing on a snowy cliff, the sky pink behind me, the mountains endless. I made tea, sat by the window. Then I opened Facebook again. My last post had gone viral, over 40,000 shares. I typed a new one. My son once called me extra, but the forgotten woman in 32E now flies first class, sleeps in silence, and eats by the sea. The woman he thought would never rise just canceled his mortgage from a leather seat in the sky. Let this be a reminder, the ones you step on may one day own the stairs. By morning it had 10,000 likes. Someone had finally heard me, not because I shouted, but because I remembered. And as I stared out at the Nebraska sky, soft with spring and streaked with light, I whispered to the breeze. My son called me extra. But the extra woman sits in 1A now, flying quietly above the ones who once shoved her beside the toilet. Weeks passed. The house that once buzzed with entitled voices and distant laughter now stood still. I heard from a neighbor that James had to refinance. My job is at reached solar reflect that his wife returned to part-time work and that the children now stayed with their other grandmother after school. They never asked me for help again. Not directly, but every Sunday like clockwork, my oldest grandson sent a message. Hi, Grandma. Just thinking of you. Hope Alaska was beautiful. Miss your pancakes. I read them all. I never replied, not out of cruelty, but because silence was my inheritance too. One afternoon I opened the drawer where I kept all my past. Inside were photos, letters. The first ones James had written from camp when he was 8, how he missed my meatloaf, how he hated sharing a bunk. The dried daffodil he gave me for Mother's Day when he was 10. A note from his college graduation. Thanks, Mom. Couldn't have done this without you. People do not become cruel overnight. They forget slowly. And I had been forgotten, piece by piece. But that was no longer my sorrow to carry. I began walking every morning around a quiet lake where geese trailed their young and old couples held hands in soft silence. I wore my new coat. I sipped tea from a thermos engraved with my initials, a gift I bought for myself. No more waiting for flowers that never came. No more hoping to be remembered. I remembered myself. Sometimes, women at the park would join me, other grandmothers, other quiet hearts. We talked of sons and silence and strength, of stories we had swallowed for years. One of them, her name was Evelyn, told me, I used to think growing old meant disappearing, but now I know. It just means we finally have time to speak. I smiled. She was right. One evening I pulled out a blank notebook. Its cover was worn leather, soft and strong. On the first page I wrote, My name is Ruth. I was once called Extra, but now I sit in the quiet place where no one talks over me. I eat alone by candlelight, not because I am unloved, but because peace tastes better than apology. Then I kept writing. Page after page, the truth finally told. Not shouted, just remembered. Because for women like me, memory is sharper than any blade. And when the world forgets us, we write our names in ink, so they will never forget again. Thank you for listening to my story. If it stirred something in your heart, if you've ever felt invisible, discarded, or called extra by the very people you once carried, then know this: you are not alone. Here at Grandma True Stories, we tell the stories that were whispered, hidden, or ignored. Stories of quiet revenge, long memory, and the kind of strength that doesn't shout, it remembers. If you've ever been left behind, underestimated, or told you were too old to matter, this channel is for you. And if you ever find yourself in seat 32E, just remember, you still have the power to rise to 1A. Please subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where the silenced are finally heard, and where every grandma gets the last word. Because revenge has no expiration date, and when a grandma speaks, the world listens.